Story 1. I cannot wait. To be honest, maybe I will finally stop feeling tired all the time. Story 2. I wasn't afraid of death until I had something to lose. Story 3. I used to be afraid of death. It was something to avoid at all costs, and suicide seemed like a terrible thing to do. Watching a few people waste away from dementia or Alzheimer's disease has become a new fear. I would rather die long before that happens. Story 4. A few years ago, I had an operation that went wrong and I had an arterial bleed. It was fixed very quickly and the operation was completed successfully, but what I experienced in those moments removed my ability to be afraid of the big existential things. I felt a raw void beyond life, an infinite nothing. It was too big to feel awe, fear, or any real emotion. Thank fuck it's all over. That feeling has lived in the back of my mind ever since. Story 5. I spend a lot of time thinking about death, both my own and everyone else's. That may sound depressing, but I do not feel depressed about it. It helps me keep perspective and be prepared for the unexpected. I am not afraid of death at the moment because it is not imminent, and the thought of not existing is not scary. However, I do not think anyone really knows whether they are afraid of death until it actually comes upon them. I am sure every person who looks death in the face discovers a great deal about themselves, regardless of what they claim in their daily lives. Story 6. I am not afraid of it. It is something that will happen regardless of what we try to do. Story 7. I am not scared. A couple of years ago, I became very interested in near-death experiences. The University of Virginia School of Medicine has a whole department dedicated to their study and publishes many testimonies. It is good reading. Many stories are similar and describe feelings of peace, so I am no longer worried. My mother is there, so I know I will be all right. Story 8. When I first understood that death comes for everyone, I was about 10 or 11 years old. Story 9. I would like my dying to be pain-free if possible, but I am no more afraid of being dead than I was of being born. Story 10. I have never been too afraid of death. I helped care for my grandmother when she was dying when I was a child, which helped me understand death and not be afraid of it. Fast forward. I am pregnant. I have had 8 miscarriages since giving birth to my first child 13 years ago after the most traumatic birth and an emergency cesarean section. I am convinced that because this pregnancy is viable, I will die during labor. I am completely convinced I will leave my young child without a mother. Story 11. It was probably when I first realized it was inevitable. It was not scary all the time, just quietly unsettling in the background. Story 12. Death is the absence of consciousness. You are unaware of anything, no feelings, no awareness of the passing of time, no pleasure, no pain, nothing. It is like a dreamless sleep from which you will never awaken. Dying, on the other hand, can be a bitch. Story 13. Maybe since I was about 12. I am 27 now, and my fear of dying keeps getting worse. I will not even know when I am dead. I will simply be gone, and my family will have to deal with it. Story 14. I am not fearful of death. That being said, I no longer wish to die. I see death as the last stage before the next one. It is part of our journey, and I hope I can meet mine peacefully. Story 15. When I was 8 and attended the funeral of a 14-year-old girl, I realized that death is real and closer than we think. Story 16. Afraid? Comes and goes. The first time I realized my mortality, I was about 9 and watched a minute tick by on the clock. I thought I am alive and one day I will die. Story 17. I'm not afraid of it. I've nearly been there once. It was a very serene feeling. Story 18. I spent much of my 20s stuck in a delusionally suicidal psychotic depression. When I was attempting to overdose and die painlessly, I fell asleep believing I would not wake up, and each subsequent morning I would awaken disheartened with another swell of sadness and hopelessness. I don't fear death. Death is an apathetic inevitability. What I do with my remaining time is my choice, as is who I share my life with and how I seek to have a positive influence on the world. Story 19. I am not afraid of death, but some of the processes of dying sound pretty horrendous. I hope I get one that is not excruciating. Story 20. Since I was little, I have believed that some people are not afraid of it. Story 21. I used to be terribly afraid, but I lost most of that fear because of depression. I'm still somewhat afraid of being cold and buried underground, even though I probably would not feel anything. I also hate the idea of being eaten by maggots. Story 22. My coworker was flung through her windshield. Fucking awful. Rest in peace, Chloe. Story 23. You and I could die tomorrow or tonight. I try to live each day as if it is my last. I am ready to go if that is my fate. I have seen and done enough. I just hope my 2 children live happy and healthy lives when I am gone. I am a 44-year-old female. Story 24. I am not afraid of death because I am chronically ill. I almost die every day. However, the ways I almost experience death are traumatic and harsh, and they leave me a bit bored. Story 25. I always have been, and now even more so, I am afraid of being killed by costumed goons while everyone around is too busy chanting. Story 26. I would not say I am fearless about it, but there is nothing you can do about it. Limiting risk and staying healthy are not the same as avoiding death. When it is your time, end of story. That gives me peace and makes me mostly unafraid. Story 27. I dismissed the arrogance toward death that comes with youth. Now I do not. I am ready for the inevitable. It cannot be worse. Story 28. I'm only as afraid of not getting to do everything I want to do or of the possibility of a painful death. Story 29. The only thing that scares me is dying before my 2 cats do. When I rescued them at 4 weeks old, I promised that I would always take care of them. They are almost 12 years old now. Story 30. I have always been very afraid of death, but maybe less so now that I am in my 50s. It is just too exhausting and pointless to worry about all the time. Story 31. I was about 8 years old when my grandmother passed away from esophageal cancer. I still think about her now. Every time I go home, I remember how she used to cook my favorite food for me. Story 32. I was 6 years old when I encountered the word for the first time. It worsened when I was probably 9 or 10. Story 33. I am not afraid of it. Time in the military in certain places removed all fear. Story 34. I'm not quite ready for my life review. I feel I have to do more for strangers, and in that sense I'm not ready to go. I'm not afraid, just not ready. Story 35. I'm 40. I have come to terms with mortality and I don't fear death. I might have been a strange child. After my dad's dog died and I had to ride in the back of the utility vehicle with its corpse on the way home, I started routinely imagining what it would be like for close family members to die, to the point that I would bring myself to tears. As a teenager, when my grandfather died young at 63, I was torn up and cut myself off from my family emotionally. By the time my next grandparent died, I felt very little, and by the following one I felt nothing. These days, with a wife and family, the reality of death is different. I don't fear it. I try to meditate on death as an adult Catholic convert, and I still imagine what life would be like if people close to me were to pass away. Story 36. When I was in grade school, the father of my best friend was a funeral home director. We played downstairs with a body lying on the slab in the lab next door. Since retiring, I have had 2 cancers and a cellulitis scare. I view it as waiting in line for my turn to tandem skydive. It is extremely scary, but I cannot back down. It is exhilarating when it happens, though. Story 37. I have come so close to death that I no longer fear it. I fear not living, not being in my grandchildren's lives and watching them grow. I see what happens to people who stop living. For some it is hours before death. For others it is years. Do not stop living. That is when death catches up to you. Story 38. Between 2019 and 2023, there was a sudden string of deaths among people I knew. High school teachers, a former classmate, relatives of my parents, my uncle, and even my grandmother. They occurred within months of each other. I cannot shake the feeling that one of my immediate family will be next, perhaps even me. At that time, I was just learning the ropes of adulthood. I was not ready to die. I had not graduated college, mastered the skills I needed to live on my own, found a partner, or landed my dream job. There were too many things I wanted to do, and I felt that a single emergency or accident could make everything I had achieved meaningless. Story 39. I do not fear the idea of being dead. We all come into the world, and there is a finish line to our journey. Not going to lie, I am curious whether there is anything on the other side. If there is not, that is totally fine. I hope the process of dying will not be painful for me. Story 40. I was very afraid of death in my early teens. I had awful anxiety about it. I am now in my 50s. I do not love the idea of not existing, but I am fairly chill about it. Story 41. I am not afraid of death. I am more afraid of how I am going to die. I hope it will be while I am sleeping in my bed, peacefully and painlessly. I started feeling like this 20 years ago. Story 42. It was probably sometime in my teens when it stopped being an abstract idea and started feeling real. I am not fearless, but I think I am more afraid of not living fully than of death itself. Story 43. I'm really sorry you're feeling so distressed. If you are in immediate danger, please call emergency services now, for example, 911 in the United States, or your local emergency number. If you are in the United States, you can call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you are elsewhere, please contact your local emergency services or a suicide prevention hotline in your country. If you tell me your country, I can help find local numbers. Please consider reaching out to a trusted person or a mental health professional. I'm here to listen and can help find resources. Edited text. I'm a millennial, and I wish someone would take me out, either for dinner or with a gun. Whatever happens first. Story 44. As has been mentioned, there are fates far worse than death. Story 45. I literally could not care less about it. I have seen several people die in different ways, and it can be grim, but I am not going to worry about it until it happens. I am certainly not scared of it. Story 46. There were times when the thought of death was, in a sense, comforting. I no longer hope that someday a truck will hit me, but I do not fear dying either. Story 47. I realized long ago that it is unavoidable, so there is no point in worrying. I just hope it is quick when it does happen and that I have a good few healthy years left. Story 48. I was diagnosed with the same rare degenerative neurological condition that my grandmother died from 18 months ago at age 45. I am terrified of the same outcome. Story 49. I am not afraid. Why fear what must be eventually? I am not in a particular hurry, but I am not going to fret about it. Story 50. I had a lot of immediate family members die, and because of experiencing that, for a long time I thought I was not scared of death. I had seen so much of it that it almost felt inevitable. I resolved to simply make the most of the time I had, however long that might be. My spiritual practice is also a comfort regarding death. It is just a transition and nothing to fear. However, I then experienced an acute health crisis and found myself clinging to life, fighting ferociously, with not an ounce of peace in my soul. It shocked me. I thought I would be more zen about the whole experience, but I was not. When it came down to it, I wanted to live with every fiber of my being. I realized that it is easy to say you are not scared of death because you are probably not faced with your own imminent death when making such a statement. Other people's deaths are one thing, as is knowing that someday you could die, but knowing you could die now in a real sense is very different, and not an awareness I would wish upon anyone. It is exceedingly distressing. I realize now that I am afraid of not living more, because I have a lot more life I want to live, a lot more I want to be present for, and nearly dying made that crystal clear. I do not spend much time on this thought or concern because it is wasted energy, but I certainly realize where I stand. I want to live. This is likely an unpopular take, but for all the people casually saying they do not fear death, either they are a Zen master who lives in a monastery, have nothing to live for, or are someone who has not actually faced death and therefore do not have the slightest clue what it really means to know if you are scared of it or not. Death itself, in its last moments, can be peaceful and welcoming, but fighting death is not. It is traumatic. It changes you, both for the better, because every sunrise is more glorious and every sip of water sweeter, and for the worse, because you have experienced animalistic terror in a way no other experience does. Too long, did not read, I was probably always scared of death. That is natural for a living being who wants to keep living. I just did not realize it until I was faced with it. Now I know. Story 51. I do not fear my own death. I could not care less, actually. I fear the death of my parents and friends. That fear began about 3 years ago when I was 23. Story 52. I am not afraid of death. I just do not want it to be prolonged by so many treatments that make life unbearable. My 40-year-old son died in July last year after 13 years of fighting Hodgkin lymphoma. He had one last option after extensive chemotherapy and immunotherapy, and finally a stem cell transplant, which led to his death. Over those years, he had many complications. Serious skin problems with constant bleeding and severe muscle pain. He just wanted relief. Story 53. When I had my child, everything changed. Before having children, I was fearless. I had a few operations, some essential and one optional. Going under was no big deal. I was nervous but never scared. The first and still only operation I had after my child terrified me as they prepared me for general anesthesia and wheeled me into the operating room. I was in tears and almost hyperventilating, thinking, what if I do not wake up? I will probably stop being afraid of death once my child is a settled, happy adult. My biggest fear is dying before then. After that, everything will be all right. Story 54. I worry about my dog and my disabled former housemate, whom I keep from poverty by covering her bills. I have a decent term life insurance policy, but it expires in 16 years, so in that time I will either die or have to figure out my finances. My death itself is irrelevant to me personally. I'm sorry you feel this way. Are you thinking about hurting yourself, or do you have a plan to do so? If you are in immediate danger, please call your local emergency number right now. If you are able, consider reaching out to a trusted person or a mental health professional. If you would like, tell me your country and I can provide local crisis resources and helplines. Story 55. Am I afraid of death? Not really. I am afraid of dying, though. There is little I can do about it except take care of myself, right? Story 56. I had a near-death experience. When I thought it was about to happen, I felt the calmest and most peaceful moment of my life. In real time, it lasted a second, but it felt like a minute. My last thought was that this is how it happens. Then I miraculously survived unscathed. In short, I do not fear death, and I actually look forward to experiencing that calm again. Story 57. I used to not be. Now I am. I do not want to feel pain. I worked so hard to live that dying would be a bummer. Story 58. Unfortunately, I grew up with a lot of death in my family. Pretty much every year for 28 years someone died. So I've become pretty numb to it by now, and I think, as everyone must at some point, I have accepted that it is a natural part of life. Whether you are religious or not, one sure thing is that one day you are no longer here, and everyone, whether now or later, needs to come to terms with it. What I can tell you is I am scared of how I will die. I had a cousin who got trapped in a car as it went up in flames, and I imagine that would be excruciating, like melting. My uncle fell asleep behind the wheel, they presumed, and drove headfirst into a truck. I don't imagine he was in pain even for a fraction of a second. Right now, my stepdad has incurable cancer, and after a few rounds of chemotherapy, we were sitting on the porch laughing. He told me that now he understands why people quit and say, fuck it, I'd rather die. The chemotherapy was so terrible. I'm ranting, but yeah. In short, I'm not scared of death, but I'm scared of how I die. Hopefully, I will die in my sleep at some point. Story 59. I do not think I am afraid of death. I am more afraid of the manner of my death. Story 60. Random chain of thoughts. I am not scared at all. If it is painful, I do not look forward to that, but I did have a near-death experience and it was very calm and not painful. I lost a lot of blood and needed 5 pints. They probably overdid it with white blood cells because I received 2 units of those as well. I saw ghosts as a child in my home. As an adult, I hear them and can smell perfumes and other scents, but I do not see them. I know I am not crazy because both my mother and my son have mentioned similar experiences. My son has both seen and heard them, knowing they are their helps, But I am confused because some people seem to stay while others go elsewhere after they die and only visit occasionally. I have even been visited and given messages to share. Getting the nerve to communicate the message and receiving confirmation from the message recipient felt like proof to me. I am confused about how Christianity fits, because there are so many denominations and variations, and I tend to prefer the basics. I believe in the historical figures, but I wonder whether there is any truth to the idea of historical visitors who influenced humanity. If that were true, are we part of some sort of experiment or game set up by gods for some reason? For example, the Book of Enoch is withheld from many versions of the Bible. Story 61. I don't know if I was ever afraid of death. I'm definitely not afraid of it now. I watched both parents die. My dad was talking to someone, I think his sister or father, so I'm pretty sure there is something else. But even if not, and it's just an ending, I'm okay with that. At least the pain will stop. Story 62. I am planning a specific one now. I have wanted it for almost my whole life. Story 63. I'm sorry you're feeling so overwhelmed. Sounds like you've been through a lot and are in a great deal of pain. Are you safe right now? If you are in immediate danger, please call emergency services right away. If you are in the United States, you can call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you are elsewhere, please contact your local emergency number or crisis line. I can help find local resources or rewrite this text for text-to-speech. Would you like that? I've nearly died 3 times already. My life is pretty bad at times and feels outside my control. I'm only afraid of pain and of losing others I care about. When death comes for me, I will gladly greet it like an old friend. Story 64. I am not scared of death. I am a little scared of the process of dying. Mostly I am worried about the people who will miss me, especially those who might miss me more than I miss them. Story 65. How can you be alive unless you have already been dead? We have all been non-existent before we were born. Outside of violent death or injury, the process of dying can cause the same fear as the peak of a first-time roller coaster ride. Fear of the unknown. That anxiety is what I feel. Facing the unknown, an eternity of non-existence, can be unsettling. Our minds cannot really comprehend it, but I take solace in knowing it is something everyone must face eventually. Story 66. I am not really afraid of death itself, but I am concerned about how I die and the uncertainty of what will happen afterward. Story 67. I think I became less afraid of death itself when I realized that some people die peacefully in their sleep, for example, while others die a slow, painful death. I am now more afraid of how I will die. I would hate to spend my final months or years in pain or to slowly deteriorate from dementia. Story 68. I am not afraid of death. I am afraid of things left undone. Story 69. I have never been afraid of death, and I do not believe there is anything after death, so it does not concern me because I will not know about it. A slow, drawn-out death would be unpleasant, but actual death itself would be a relief. I see no point in worrying about it. It will happen whether I worry or not. Story 70. It started around age 8. My brother was younger, about 6. I am not afraid of it anymore. I have made peace with it. I know I will be emotional about it in the future, but for now it is not something I need to worry about. It will happen. With my limited time on Earth, I plan to free myself from the workaholic cycle and focus on helping people and spreading joy. By the way, I have been an atheist since I was 6. Story 71. I had children at 31. I am 38, male for reference. That was a milestone when I started thinking about it. I am now afraid to fly, but I function when I have to. I used to love flying. Life is weird. Story 72. I am neither looking forward to it nor afraid of it. Statistically, I will live about 30,000 days, maybe a few thousand more. One day I will die. On the tens of thousands of other days, I will live. Story 73. This bothered me a lot in grade school, but it soon passed. As I get older, my only fear is whether it will be painful and the hole it will leave for my stepdaughter. Otherwise, it has been a good ride. Story 74. I used to be afraid of it and of what might lie beyond. I used to hope for something other than dreamless sleep, but I am over being myself. I do not want or deserve anything after this. Story 75. I don't fear it. I have seen too much end-of-life suffering. Many times death is a relief and part of living. I'm 75 and it is on my mind off and on. When the time comes, I'll welcome the call home. Story 76. I'm looking forward to it. I had a near-death experience about 30 years ago, and it was so great that I have longed to go back ever since. Story 77. I have always been more afraid of pain than of death. These days I tolerate pain much better. Regarding death, I do not want to die because there are people I need to live for. However, when it is my time to go, I will be fine. Story 78. I am not afraid of death, although there are certainly ways of dying that I fear. My feelings about death are more like the power going out with 15 minutes left in a movie, or discovering that the sequels to a book you just read were never published because the author died. I am just sad I will not get to see all the cool things the future holds. Imagine having died in 1990 without seeing the rise of the internet and the ubiquity of smartphones, the real-world Dick Tracy gadgets, and the information age. Maybe I will see real-world artificial intelligence or flying taxis. I will not see a space elevator, and I highly doubt I will see an actual Martian colony, much less a moon colony. Story 79. The only thing I worry about is making sure everyone is in a good place when I go. I should have 3 or more decades left, so I am not that close, but I am in the age range when sudden death can occur. I am actually kind of intrigued to see what comes next. There are a lot of theories. If it is just sleep, then sleep is fine too. I feared my parents dying, and when my dad died, the healing process made me realize I did not fear death. It was the time spent knowing death was coming that was hardest. Death was a relief. It was hard, do not get me wrong, but he was not in pain. He is out there doing whatever we do after we die. Story 80. I used to be afraid of death, until somebody asked me, "Where were you before you were born?" And that got me thinking, dying isn't something to look forward to, but death isn't something to fear. Story 81. I do not fear death. I just do not want to die. I was absolutely sure I was going to die. I watched a mortar fall out of the sky toward me. It landed between me and a buddy less than 10 feet away. It was a dud. The mortar took just long enough for me to understand I was going to die, and it arrived too fast for me to do anything about it. In that moment, I had to confront my mortality. I reviewed my life up to that point and felt content that if this was when I died, it would be acceptable. A good death. Then I lived. I was lucky, I guess. I have occasionally been fearful of dying in the moment since. All animals are. It is a reflex, in my opinion. It will literally save your life. But I have not feared death since. I know and accept that it will happen someday. I have no plans to get there any faster than necessary. Story 82. It is just a change of cosmic address, at least that's what Edgar said. Story 83. I'm not afraid of my own death. I'm afraid of the premature death of loved ones. As a nurse, I've seen death in many forms. It comes to us all, and I think we should speak about it more and help people accept it as part of the life cycle. Story 84. I became very afraid when my mom first got sick, and more so as her illness progressed. Eventually, the heartbreak of seeing her suffer washed that fear away. I did not fear death, especially after she passed. She looked so free and peaceful. However, the initial active dying stage briefly revived that fear until peace returned. At the same time, I feared living my life without her, and rightly so. Now I just hope that when I see her again, it will be even if only for a moment. Story 85. I used to be terrified of dying, but now I realize that when I am old enough to die, I will most likely feel ready to go. In the early days of Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer, I asked it to research reported cases of near-death experiences and reincarnation around the world and identify common themes. The common theme was unconditional love. Many reports described experiencing unconditional love upon passing and not wanting to return to the pain of the human form. Story 86. Totally fearless because you cannot experience death. Pain is a different story. Story 87. I have never really been afraid of death, but the older I get, the more I welcome it. the more I hope for it, whether it is by natural causes or a freak accident. I am concerned by what you wrote. If you are thinking about harming yourself or are in immediate danger, contact your local emergency services now. If you can, reach out to someone you trust or a crisis line. In the United States, call or text 988. In the United Kingdom and Ireland, call 116123. In Australia, call 13 11 14. I am here to listen if you want to talk. Story 88. I'm really sorry you're feeling this way. Thank you for telling me. Are you thinking about suicide or do you have a plan to harm yourself? If you are in immediate danger, please call your local emergency number now, for example, 911 in the United States, or go to the nearest emergency department. If you are in the United States, you can call or text 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. You can also text HOME to 741741 to reach a crisis counselor. In the United Kingdom, Samaritans are available at 116 123. In Australia, Lifeline is available at 13 11 14. If you are elsewhere, please contact local emergency services or your country's suicide prevention helpline. If you are not in immediate danger and would like, I can still edit your text to be suitable for Azure Text-to-Speech. Do you want me to do that now? Story 89. When I was a kid, I was under 10. My memory of childhood is fuzzy. My dad used to fight with my mom in the living room and he would scream that he was going to shoot everyone in the house in the head. I would lie there frozen, terrified that he would come and kill me and my brothers at any moment. I'm not scared of death now. I almost wouldn't mind it. I'd welcome it whenever it comes. I'm tired of all of this. I'm really sorry you went through that and that you're feeling so tired and hopeless. Are you safe right now? If you are in immediate danger, please call your local emergency number. If you are in the United States or Canada, you can call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. You can also text 741741 for the crisis text line. If you are in the United Kingdom or Ireland, Samaritans are at 116 123. In Australia, Lifeline is 13 11 14. If you want, I can help find local resources or support options. Story 90. I stopped being afraid of death after coming very close to it during pancreatic surgery that went terribly wrong. As I get older and see loved ones die, death becomes more of a reality than a concept. I realized that some experiences in life are worse than death. Story 91. I'm not scared of death. I'm scared of dying in a slow, painful way. Being dead doesn't scare me at all. That used to worry me when I was Mormon. I worried about it every day when I was little. Story 92. I started fearing death at a very young age because my dad would always say, "You can't do this. What if something terrible happens and you die?" I grew up terrified. In the last 5 years or so, I've accepted that one day I'll die and that it's part of life, so I should live fully until then. Reading the book From Here to Eternity by Caitlin Doughty helped me accept death more. Story 93. I had a bad childhood, suffered from mental illness, and could not connect with other people. When I finally had something to lose and held my wife, my pets, and my home in my hands, I realized they were all made of glass. Story 94. The concept of death first reached me in 3rd grade when, during sports camp, I realized that my parents would eventually die and that I too would someday die. A few years later, my grandfather died. Last year, my uncle died. I realized that death merely marks the end of a life, rather than the end of a person. I am grateful for those who meant a lot to me, and I have stopped fearing death. If anything, I would greet them with open arms. Story 95. As a young child in the 1980s, I was very afraid. All anyone talked about on the news was the Cold War. I used to have nightmares about nuclear war, living in a bunker, or being vaporized. I am not afraid of death now. Story 96. I have never really feared death. If it is my time, it is my time. I almost died at 18 or 19 because of a serious heart condition, and doctors said it was a miracle I had not dropped dead. I am not fearless about it, but I understand it is a natural part of life, and I will accept it when it comes in whatever form. Story 97. I do not really fear death itself. I fear a long, drawn-out, painful death. Story 98. My grandfather was 102 and was afraid of dying. I will never forget him telling us that before he died. I have feared death my whole life. I am fully aware of how fragile life is and know it could happen at any second. Story 99. I am not afraid of death. I am afraid of the way I am going to die. Story 100. Not scared at all. If I were, I could not sleep. I could literally die in my sleep every night. I do not care. Rehabilitation after a near-death experience is very difficult, though. I am sorry you are feeling this way. Are you safe right now? If you are in immediate danger, please call your local emergency number, for example, 911 in the United States. If you are in the United States, you can call or text 988 or visit 988 Lifeline.org for support. In the United Kingdom, contact Samaritans at 116 123. In Australia, Lifeline is 13 11 14. Consider reaching out to a trusted person, a mental health professional, or a crisis line. If you want, I can help you find local resources or stay with you here. Story 101. Right after my wife gave birth to our twin girls, I did not think anyone could really understand the feeling until they became parents themselves. Story 102. Around 7 or 8, I was learning about time and history at school, and the idea that people hundreds of years ago would never exist again hit me. The finality of infinity, that once you died it was over forever, freaked me out. Even 100 years seemed massive, and the thought of time stretching to 1,000, 1,000,000, or 50 million years was terrifying. I remember it happening in the back of the car on the way to a swimming lesson. It was a thought I had to fight for years because it really freaked me out. It was more a fear of infinite time than of death. But the two were mixed together and scary. Story 103. I used to constantly want to die and wasn't afraid of death. Now I have so many lovely things in life that I don't want to die, though I still don't fear death itself. I sometimes worry about how I will die and whether it will hurt or involve suffering beforehand, but I know we will all die eventually, so it's not something to be afraid of. Story 104. I'm not afraid of death. I just don't want to be there when it happens. Story 105. I am not sure if you can find it anymore, but someone took the Swan Song screenshot and overlaid it with the movie Enter the Void. This post reminded me of it. Story 106. I flatlined several times after a car wreck tore an artery. Maybe it's different for everyone, but for me it was a timeless, dreamless sleep. Could have been seconds or centuries, and I wouldn't have known. Because of that, I'm not worried anymore. Story 107. I'm in healthcare. I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid of dying badly. Hopefully, the United States will adopt sensible euthanasia laws before that time comes. Story 108. I don't know that I was ever afraid. I had that youthful feeling of immortality right up to the cancer diagnosis. That immediately, almost overnight, forced me to come to grips with it and to accept what is inevitable for all of us, cancer or not. Story 109. I currently don't have a fear of death. It's hard to explain. I don't want to die. I enjoy life, but I also accept that, given how much I travel and take what other people consider risks, if I were in a position where death was imminent, I would not be afraid. I will say, though, that if I found myself in a body of water and a great white shark was heading straight for me, my asshole might pucker up a bit. Story 110. I do not fear death because I do not have to be alive for my goal to be attained. I only fear failure. Story 111. I used to be afraid of it as a kid, but then I adopted the idea that whenever it is time, that is fine. That does not mean I will not fight to survive. I want to go out knowing I did everything I could and be okay with it not being enough. Story 112. I would not say I am scared of it, but it is not something I am excited about. Because of my beliefs, I am somewhat indifferent toward death. Story 113. I'm really sorry you're feeling this way. Are you thinking about hurting yourself or ending your life? If you are in immediate danger, please call your local emergency number now. For example, in the United States, call or text 988 or call 911. If you are in the United Kingdom, contact Samaritans at 116 123. If you are elsewhere, please contact your local emergency services or your country's suicide prevention hotline. If you are not in immediate danger but struggling, please consider telling someone you trust, contacting a healthcare professional, or calling a crisis line. I can help reword your original text for Azure Text-to-Speech when you're ready, or stay here with you and listen. Which would you prefer? Story 114. I realized I would stop existing at 4, and it was intense. I was crying to my parents about it. They giggled and said they would die much sooner than I would, that it should not be my concern, and I started crying harder while laughing my ass off. I am not scared anymore. I have kind of let go of the thought that I am special. I am more like a vessel. It is hard to explain. I am a determinist observing the consequences of my nature and nurture. There is not much to lose when I am going to lose myself. Besides, I will not know that I am dead, and that is fine. Story 115. I am not afraid of death. I am afraid of the suffering that leads to death and of the pain those who survive me will experience. Story 116. I'm not scared of death or of being dead. If anything, it's quite reassuring. It's how that death happens which I find unsettling. In my sleep, upside down in a pub toilet? Who can be sure? Story 117. Usually death becomes real through loss, illness, or the realization that time is not endless. Most people are not fearless. They have simply made peace with it. Story 118. Am I afraid for myself? Not really. I do not expect anything in the end, and I am trying to make the most of my time here. Am I afraid for my immediate loved ones? Yes, absolutely. If I lost my wife and daughter, I would no longer have a reason to live or to strive. They are my everything. I have hobbies and a few acquaintances, but my wife is my best friend and my daughter is my closest companion. Without them, I would just be myself, and that scares me. Story 119. I do not know when the fear started. I do know when it ended at the age of 25. My father died, and since then I no longer fear dying. I would embrace it. There is a chance I can meet my father again. Story 120. I am not afraid of death. I am just afraid of the pain that may come with it. Story 121. I have been declared dead 3 times in my life. Ego death was the most peaceful bliss I have ever felt. The first time, the self that had been before did not return, and I was reborn into this world. Since then, I have died twice more but returned more evolved. I am not afraid of dying. Life is a gift and death is natural. Do not rush toward it. It will come eventually. I hope anyone here who is wishing for death finds peace in this world. Story 122. Once I grasped the idea that when I die I might be gone forever, I felt terrified. I do not know whether I believe in reincarnation, so it is not the act of dying that scares me, but the unknown after death. Story 123. I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid of how I will die. I hope it's just peacefully in my sleep and not something painful. Death itself is the easy part. Dying is the potentially hard part. Story 124. As soon as I knew about it, anyone who says they are fearless about it is lying, to be honest. Story 125. I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid of a stupid one, or even worse, a meaningless one. I believe this is true for most people. Given the opportunity to go in a meaningful way, making an impact on someone else's life or on the world, I'd bet most people would go peacefully. Story 126. People you have known since Methuselah are disappearing one by one. Soon a question arises. Will I be next? Story 127. I have never been afraid of death, or rather of being dead. Not being alive 100 years ago was no problem, and it probably will not be a problem 100 years from now. The process of dying can be pretty nasty, which is why I am legally resident in a country with sensible assisted dying laws so I can avoid that outcome if necessary. Story 128. I'm not afraid of death itself, but I fear dying painfully. I've struggled with suicide for almost half my life, so death is a familiar concept to me. I've never attempted it because I was too afraid. Even jumping under a train has a higher chance of survival than you'd think. I wouldn't care if today were my final day. All I hope is that it's painless, that I just drop down and feel a cold, dark blanket of nothingness cover me. I'm sorry you're feeling this way. Are you safe right now? If you are in immediate danger, please call your local emergency number. If you are in the United States, you can call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you are elsewhere, please contact local emergency services or a crisis line in your area. If you want, I can help find resources or stay with you here. Story 129. I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness and spent the first part of my life believing I would never die because Armageddon would come and I would enter the new system, essentially a paradise on earth. I left the organization when I was around 18 or 19 and had a sudden wake-up realization that I could die and that I truly did not have time. That scared me and gave me time anxiety that I still struggle with. I had a near-death experience, so death does not scare me anymore and I know what to expect. I am afraid of not using my time on this earth well or of not becoming all that I could be. Story 130. I am not afraid of death. I have been close to it a few times, but I am afraid of pain. I do not want to suffer. Story 131. I am not scared of death. After all, we are all going to die, and we do not know when. Story 132. Many people say they don't have fear. That's total bullshit. Just wait. Story 133. When I was a kid, my best friend told me she was very afraid of death. I was not old enough to really fathom it, so I talked to my grandfather about it. He explained that there comes a time when you are ready for death, as he was. He had lived a long life and his cup was full. There was not much more he could fit in it. I looked at my little 8-year-old life and thought my cup felt full too. That feeling stayed with me my whole life. I felt what I had lived was enough and everything else was bonus. I almost died from pancreatitis last year. The only thing that gave me pause about death was that I have a young son and wanted to watch him grow up. Story 134. Death is not scary at all. Dying is because the brain is strange. Death sounds like a great relief, and I am not afraid of it. Story 135. 2 years ago, I woke up and found my heart beating at 180 to 190 beats per minute because of atrial fibrillation. They had to sedate me and shock my heart to restore a normal rhythm. Oddly, my thought before they knocked me out was that if this was it, I was okay with it. I had seen the world, lived a great life, and have an amazing family. I really could not ask for more. Story 136. I am almost 80. I am not afraid of death, but I am a little apprehensive about the manner of it. Story 137. When I was about 4 or 5, I was knocked unconscious for the first time. It was frightening when I woke up and many adults were surrounding me. My parents, police officers, and paramedics. I was knocked out a few more times before age 7 and had grand mal seizures for years. It was terrifying and made me think about death. As a child, I could not understand what was happening, and it was never explained, so I drew my own conclusions. Magnetic resonance imaging scans as an adult have shown I have extensive white matter damage, dead brain cells, in my left hemisphere. I am now 70, and thoughts of death are less frightening, though they remain my greatest fear. Story 138. Death is just the next thing. I am not afraid of it, but dying scares me. Story 139. Before I had a child, I was not afraid of death. I almost welcomed it. But now that I have a little boy, the thought of leaving him too soon terrifies me more than anything else. Story 140. Suffocation scares me because I watched my mother suffocate in her own blood. I had never seen that much fear in anyone's eyes. Before that, I had no fear of death. Many deaths involve the suffering of suffocation, but in hospice or in the hospital, morphine relieves that suffering and can provide a peaceful death. I am not afraid of not existing. I will achieve some of my life goals by dying, such as ensuring my children receive enough from my life insurance for each to pay off a home. Story 141. Why be scared of something you can't control and that is inevitable? It seems silly to waste energy on it. Death will be welcomed. Have you seen the world we live in now? Story 142. I was afraid as a child, especially after my dog died when I was 3. I developed many mental health issues around ages 10 to 12, which led me not to fear death but to wish for it. After medication and therapy, I do not have a detailed plan for my life, but I hope to live a happy life and die peacefully surrounded by the people I love. Story 143. Afraid of dying. Not sure I am afraid of death. A friend once said that life after death is probably a lot like life before birth. I think he is right. Story 144. I am not scared. It is going to happen one day. We are born to die. Story 145. I don't fear death. Everyone and everything dies. What's to be afraid of? Story 146. Since I was a child, I occasionally think about non-existence and experience a brief visceral panic reaction, but it passes. Story 147. I guess any true Muslim does not fear death, because it is the only thing between us and God that will allow us to meet him. Story 148. I don't fear death, but I am afraid of what I may have to go through to get there. My husband's death was terrible because of the pain he experienced. Story 149. For some reason, a couple of years ago I developed health anxiety and feared my panic attacks would make my heart pop like a pimple. After I started medications, I thought screw it. At least I would be at peace. I have been on both sides of the spectrum. Story 150. I don't think I fear death. What I do fear is leaving my children without a mother. Story 151. I have never been scared of it. I am just bummed that things will have to end. Story 152. I am not scared of death. Once I am dead, I am dead. I am afraid of suffering while dying and of how my death will affect others. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.